Night, because you have a huge problem with the IRS, I've got some free advice for you. This service is strictly limited to individuals that owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes. And if you qualify, we can guarantee that you won't be writing a big fat check to the IRS, or our services cost you nothing. The first 100 people that call today will get a free tax consultation worth $500. Stop worrying about your IRS problem. We can help you, we promise. Call the tax doctor right now. I mean right now, to learn more.
800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. 800-240-4587. That's 800-240-4587.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
To be wild. Well. Good evening and welcome back to Texas Wild with Ryan Prigmore. Adventures from the water to the campfire. This is my first studio visit in well over 2 months. I've been busy. I've been out. I've had a shoulder injury, I've had work, I've had emergencies, I've had, well, if you can name it, I've had it. A lot of different things that seem to come up on Thursdays for the last 8 weeks in a row, 9 weeks. Let's see, last week I was here, but the studio wasn't. This is our new studio. If you can't really look around because you don't have access to the camera, do you? But we got a new place. We got, new equipment. It's ready to go. Well, old equipment, but new place. It's we're here. So welcome back to Texas Wild with Ryan Prigmore. Tonight, we're going to talk about something very near dear to me. Texas-sized trips in a bathtub-sized boat. I've always wanted to get on a river, a Texas river, and travel. Back in the old days, these rivers were all navigable. The Brazos was used for various things like shipping cotton and different textiles to market. The Trinity was used. Dallas was supposed to be a seaport town. I don't know if many of you ever knew that. Dallas was supposed to be, seaport, but, all the way up to Dallas is what, we were doing. We were running boats up and down the Trinity River all the way. And I've always wanted to get on a small boat with some camping gear and do some sandbar camping, take a 3-4 day trip up the river and just see what we can find. And the people that do this, one gentleman in particular, his name is Robert Youens, who will be joining us remotely tonight. He's going to call in here in a little bit. He takes these 1,000-mile trips in a 14-foot John boat. I have a 22-foot aluminum boat with an inordinate amount of storage on it, so I'm going to be throwing a tent and some other camping gear, camping rig, cooking rig, galley rig in the boat, and taking a little trip. We're going to launch from Lake Whitney. We're going to head up the Brazos River a couple days, and we're going to camp on the sandbar. We're going to do some fishing. We're going to do some general exploring, hiking, maybe some rock climbing. We're just going to see what we find. We're going to have a good time, and it's going to be one for the books. It's going to be one of those trips that you just don't forget. You got a lot of pictures, a lot of notes. I like to take notes when I'm on a trip like that. And here he is right now, Robert, calling in. Good evening and welcome to Texas Wild with Ryan Prigmore.
Hey, Ryan, it's Robert.
Robert, this has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It's taken a while to get it done, but I'm looking forward to visiting with you and your followers.
I am too, man. It's going to be a good little evening. We're going to have some storytelling to do, and it's going to be great.
Okay, you take the lead.
Robert, tonight we're talking about Texas-sized trips in a bathtub-sized boat. That's something you know all about, isn't it?
I've been doing it for a long time and done a couple of really big ones the last few years.
Right on. Tell me a little bit about your boat.
The boat I'm running now is a well-built. It's made up in northeastern Arkansas. It's a 16-foot long, 56-inch wide with a Mod V.
I see. I said it was
a 40 horsepower Tohatsu.
I had said that it was a 14-foot John boat. My apologies.
Okay.
Man,
I did set the world record that trip I did where I ended up coming down the Ohio and Mississippi and then crossing the Gulf. I did that in a 14-foot tracker. But
tell me about that one. Tell me about the length, the duration, some of the things you experienced. Tell me a little bit about that trip.
Okay, well, this was I guess like 4 or 5 years ago, and
now you said this was a world record trip.
I had dreams of bigger trips, and so I started doing some preparation. I first got a little 15-foot tracker with a 25, and it was a riveted boat. And I did a trip from Mobile, Alabama, up to Tom Bigby through Mississippi and Alabama, up that way into Tennessee. And I just destroyed that riveted boat and decided I needed to go to a welded boat. I ended up getting a 14 tracker welded boat.
How did you destroy it?
Go ahead.
How did you destroy that boat?
Oh, just running and chop. Running and chop just destroys boats. It's the hundreds and hundreds of miles of pounding and 16-inch chop that just destroys a boat, and a riveted boat's just not made to handle that.
Right on. That's more of a pleasure boat, huh? For like protected water and whatnot.
Yeah, running in stock ponds and stuff. But if you get on a big river, you're gonna get into chop. So that's when I made the decision to go over to a welded boat, and I really didn't understand the market that well. So Tracker was a big name, and so I went out and tried one of those, and it was a good boat. The problem is that it's a flaw of the Tracker is they absorb water. They waterlog. And mine, the waterlogged about 160 pounds of water in it, and I decided I needed to find a boat that was bigger. And by this time, I was starting to formulate some of my bigger trips of going to the Arctic and doing the Inside Passage and maybe doing some Caribbean stuff. And I knew I need to get a bigger, stronger welded boat.
Something that's not going to get waterlogged and wind up sinking. Something that's not going to take on a bunch of water.
Yeah, I needed high sides. I needed a 20-inch transom. I needed something that I could go out and get on a big river like the Mississippi River and not just, take on a lot of water if a barge passed by. And could handle, 16-inch chop.
Right.
And my well-built did a good job of that.
Right on. That's good. So the well-built boat, aside from it being welded instead of riveted, what are some of the other differences between that and the tracker that you had that made it, number one, more comfortable, number two, safer?
Well, the tracker is a bass boat. They try to make it look like a bass boat, so it's got a lot of welded in interior that you can't easily remove and get access to. And I decided if I was going to go into the Arctic, I might need to repair my boat. So I wanted a boat that I could pull the floor out of it and get access to the bottom. And a lot of things that the average boater wouldn't think about. But I had to think about how I was going to do a repair.
The average boater doesn't think about taking their boat up to the Arctic either, or setting world records for that matter.
So there was a whole lot of thoughts that were crossing my mind, and I was going to have to trailer for 5,000 miles from Austin to get up to the Arctic Ocean. The last 600 miles of that drive is called what they call that, the Dempster Highway. It's considered the roughest road in the world. It's 600 miles. And it was that alone was very hard on the boat and the trailer.
I imagine so.
And then once I got out into the Arctic, I was dealing with running into sea ice and issues like that. I was having to slide over sea ice, and that was really hard on the hull.
And this is in an aluminum John
boat. I needed
boat.
A special boat.
That blows my mind that you're doing this in an aluminum John boat. You're in the Arctic. Now, how long of a trip was that? How many miles?
I ended up doing a little over 2,000 miles up in the Arctic.
Holy hell!
The first night I woke up and I'd traveled about maybe 150 miles that day. I'd crossed the Arctic Ocean and I was into the Beaufort Sea. And I found a little cove to camp in on a point, and I set up my polar bear fence so the polar bears wouldn't hop in the boat with me. And, things a normal bass fisherman didn't worry about. And set up my tent, and I lay down on the floor of my boat to sleep that night. I'd sleep in the tent just so I didn't have as many issues with polar bears. And I never felt more alone but happier in my life. 5,000 miles from home and 150 miles from a living human being. It was awesome.
You must have been able to see stars from horizon to horizon. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well,
I imagine you probably took a camera with you.
What time of year I was in the Arctic. So I was in a time of year where the sun never set. So, I just because it's so clear up there, it's hard to imagine, but it's kind of like a desert up there. So as the twilight would come in, I could see the stars. It was unusual, but the sun didn't set. It would just come kind of down to the horizon and just slide across the horizon and then head back up. It was a kind of a bizarre feeling.
I would imagine so. Now, I imagine you probably took a camera with you on that trip, right?
Yeah, I'm a terrible YouTuber. There's some YouTube stuff on Ageless Wanderer of my world record trip that I did in the 14-foot John.
Is that your channel?
There's one video on Ageless Wanderer of the first several days of my trip into the Arctic. I had an encounter with sea ice, and then I had another encounter with a bunch of huge icebergs, and so all of that is in my first night camping in the Arctic is on that video. I had a run-in with a 65-foot bowhead whale, and I included that on that first video. But I was sitting in the sea ice in the Amundsen Gulf. I'd kind of made it out of the Arctic and into the Amundsen Gulf. And still sitting here in Austin, Texas, it's hard for me to conceive I did this stuff, and I did.
Imagine. So
but
now,
I pulled out into the Amundsen Gulf,
real quick,
and
let
I
me
was
interrupt
sitting
you
there
for just a
stuck
second,
in
Robert.
sea ice.
Let me interrupt you
And
for just a moment.
But,
Ageless Wonder, is that your YouTube channel?
yeah, Ageless, and it's Wanderer, Wanderer.
Wanderer, okay.
Yeah,
Ageless
and
Wanderer.
but I sit in the edge of that sea ice, and I contacted the Canadian government with my little inReach communicator, and I was talking to their Coast Guard, and I'd made arrangements with them before I got up there to track me and discuss rescue and all the issues I might have to deal with.
Right.
Canadian government was really nice to deal with.
I hear they're very polite.
Good.
I hear the Canadian government's very polite.
They were just good guys. We joked around. Every time I would get into a little hamlet, I would call them and say, "Hey, I'm doing everything right like you wanted me to do?" And we would joke around with each other, and it was a lot of fun. But I was on my inReach contacting them. It's like a texting device that you can do over satellite, and just as I was doing text back and forth with them, finding a route through the sea ice, this 65-foot whale came up right next to my boat.
Wow.
I'm talking 4 feet from the side, and he rose about 10 feet in the air to where he could get his eyeball about even with me, and his eyeball was about 4 feet from me, and he just looked at me. And I had goosebumps. I was like freaking out. I couldn't believe there was a whale sitting there right next to me, and they call it spy hopping. It's something the whales do, and he just looked at me, I guess, trying to figure out what I was, and then he went down underwater and just swam away. It was the most unreal experience.
I imagine that's quite a connection to have with a creature.
Yeah, I saw beluga whales. They would kind of run along the edge of the shoreline, and it looked like mist coming up in the distance. But have a 65-foot bowhead whale pull up next to you is quite the thrill. It was what I was hoping for. I hope to see narwhals, and I hope to see sea ice, and meet the people.
And I understand you got to meet the people too, didn't you?
Well, yeah, that ride up and hopping sea ice and everything. I had talked to a dealer and had them build a boat with a heavier transom and stuff, but I didn't realize how hard I was going to be on a boat, and I ended up cracking my hull. And I ended up having to reach out to the Inuit to help me fix my boat. And so I was about halfway across the Arctic, about 1,000 miles from my trailer and my car. And
now this is literally the definition of the middle of nowhere. And you happen to find somebody. You happen to find somebody that had an aluminum welder and knew how to use it.
Well, it took a while. The first town I went into was Cambridge Bay, and I had pulled into harbor to camp and threw out my anchor, set up the bear fence and my tent. And about the time I could settle down, I heard my bilge pump running, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought I took some water on that day, and it was clearing it. And then 15 minutes later, my bilge pump ran for a few minutes, and then I realized, man, I had a hole in my boat, and I did not sleep well that night with my bilge pump going off and on all night, and the tides were significant enough that I didn't want to pull ashore. So
get stuck.
Yeah, I needed to get help, and so I started meeting people in this little Inuit village. It was the largest it's one of the largest villages or hamlets in the Arctic. It's called Cambridge Bay. There's a research facility there, a military installation there. They've got about maybe 600 people, but they hadn't received their goods for the year. And that's hard to think of. Their goods for the year. They have a ship that comes there one time a year, delivers all the fuel, the heating oil, all the big supplies. Like what I needed was inert gas for MIG and TIG welding, and they were out. Wow. So there was no chance of welding my boat in Cambridge Bay.
So how do you get it fixed?
Well, I'd in my preparation, I'd met lots of people on the internet, and one of the people I met was a lady named Malwini, Malwin, or whatever, I can't remember her name. She was Dutch, and she was the captain of an ocean-going tug that was ice rated and had been converted to a luxury yacht. And she had helped me figuring out how to get charts done and everything. And I looked out in the bay when I woke up that morning, and who was in the bay except a big old ocean-going, ice-breaking tug. And I got on my radio and I said, "Hey, this is Robert. Is this Maywin?" And she goes, "Maywin, you're alive." Or, "Robert, you're alive." And she couldn't believe I'd made it to Cambridge Bay.
I can't believe you made it up.
I told her what was going on, and she said, "Anything I got on my boat, you're welcome to." And she had some adhesives and stuff that I could use to attempt to repair.
But it was good enough to get you through. Like, you made it back, obviously.
Well, no. So I worked on the boat there for a couple of days. I met a guy that let me use his machine shop where I could put it inside and get it warm enough to work on.
Right.
And so I did put a patch on it. There was a little machine shop there, and we formed some aluminum to put over it and glue this patch on. And my original plan was to go the whole 2,000 miles across the Arctic archipelago and then 2,000 miles back. But I realized I had compromised my boat, and I figured if there was a hole in the bottom, I may have compromised the internal structure also.
The
so
general overall
I did this
integrity of the
repair,
boat.
and I said, I better start trying to get back to my car.
So you didn't make it the full 2,000 miles?
No, I came out, and the weather was not good, but it was the best I was hoping I could get. And I came out into like maybe 2-3 foot breaking seas. And I knew if I could make it about 50 miles, I was going to get up against the shoreline where it's protected. So, man, I came out that day and I just beat that boat. I mean, I've got 105 gallons of fuel and all my camping gear and stuff. So it's heavily loaded. And, I made it about 150 miles from Cambridge Bay, and I pulled into a place. I found a little cove to camp in, dropped my anchor, and I could hear my bilge pump running. I had 2 bilge pumps. I could hear a bilge pump running, and it never stopped running.
Oh, man.
So, man, I knew I was in trouble. I was 150 miles from Cambridge Bay, and I had a hole in my boat so big that it was taking a 1,100 gallon per hour pump full time to keep up with it. It would keep up and keep it from the water going to my secondary bilge pump. But that was the night I didn't sleep well, and I had to look at all my alternatives. And about 105, 110 miles south of me across the Coronation Gulf was a little town called Kuklatuck that I had come through on the way over, and seemed like a nice town and kind of a more advanced town. So I thought, well, it was the closest, but I had to do 125 miles of open ocean. There was no shoreline to follow. So there were some islands in that ocean that I could head to if the crack started getting too big. And it was a gutsy move, but I headed south 110 miles or something of open ocean, headed to Kuklatuck. And as I pulled into this little town, I pulled up to the shore, and there was this little Inuit guy on his 4-wheeler, and I pulled up, and he goes, "You're in trouble, aren't you?" I said, how do you know?
You
He
have
said,
no
well,
idea.
I started following you. And you said you weren't going to come back here. And I figured if you came back here, something bad's going on. And I said, yeah, I got a really bad tear in my boat. And that little Inuit guy looked me in straight in the eyeballs and he said, Mr. Youens, I'm going to take care of you.
That's the right kind of person you want to meet out in the middle of nowhere, isn't it?
Well, you never know.
Yeah, you never do know.
Kook, but there was a hotel in that town, and I walked over to the hotel and was talking to the manager. I said, "And you know this guy named Miles, Miles Pedersen? He's offered to help me fix my boat, and I'm a beggar, and definitely I don't get to choose. But this guy's offering to help." He goes, "Oh, Robert, that guy's works for the city. He's a certified welder, great mechanic, and his dad rents a building from me, and he's got a shop there he can put your boat into to work on it." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I went out and walked over to Miles' house and knocked on the door and said, "Hey, Miles, man, I want to take you up on that offer." And he grabbed his trailer, loaded my boat on it, right there in the ocean. They don't have like boat ramps and stuff like we have because the ice, they get 9-foot thick ice over the ocean there. So kind of wipes out everything on the shorelines. So they pulled my boat out, and he and like 3 other Inuit guys just started tearing it down. I mean, they had the motor off like that. They had 4 of them had drills. They were, drilling out my floor, and it was incredible.
They knew what needed to
Ryan.
happen. They knew what they needed to do.
They did, and they got to be self-sufficient up there. So most of those guys have pretty good skills, but we worked late. These guys took off from work to help me, and the guys, Miles's boss came over, who runs the city shop where they repair equipment over there, and he says, "Hey man, if y'all want to use the city shop and our welding rig and all the stuff we got over there at night, just bring it on over here." So we got to take it into a huge shop with really nice welding equipment, and these 3 other Inuit guys came over there and helped, and it was a big job. You had to steam clean it, and
Sounds like
if you know anything about aluminum welding, everything's got to be perfectly clean. And we worked on it for several days, taking it back and forth to the city and back. And so it was about the 3rd day, and Paco says, I got to go home early tonight because I'm getting married tomorrow. I said, "Paco, you're getting married and you're up here the night before your wedding?" He says, "Oh, yeah." He says, "You want to be in the wedding?" I said, "Well, heck yes, I want to be in the wedding." So I got to be in an Inuit wedding up there. It was ultra cool. I can't wait to post that video. I got lots of good video from the wedding.
Well, I'm sure me and my listeners absolutely can't wait to watch it, man. That sounds really interesting. We've got about 1 minute and 10 seconds left in this segment, and then we're going to go to a commercial break. But when we come back, if it's all right with you, I'd kind of like to discuss some of the gear you took with you on that trip that made the trip possible, that made the trip safer, that made the trip, more comfortable, things like that.
Sure. I look forward to doing it. We'll discuss all the plotters and communication and all the preparation.
I really kind of want to know a little bit about your polar bear fence. That sounds kind of interesting. I've never heard of a polar bear fence before.
Well, I don't think anyone else had either, even including the Inuits up north. But, working farmland and ranching growing up, I learned about electric fences and figured they'd work up there on polar bears.
Right. Well, I appreciate the call. We're going to sign off here for just a few minutes and pay some bills, and then feel free to call back in just a little bit.
Okay. Do you want to contact me, or just how long should I wait?
You've got instructions in your messenger already.
Okay. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Let's be honest, wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
Joco Community Radio. Listen live at jococommunityradio.com.
Born to be wild.
All right, we got some bills paid. Now I got one more thing to do here, and then we'll be ready to get back to talking about boats and trips and camping gear and boat gear and trip gear and all kinds of stuff. NTX Radio is a radio and podcast collective, proudly serving all of North Texas and can be heard all over the world on TuneIn Radio and on the NTX Radio app on Android, Apple CarPlay, or just ask Alexa to play NTX Radio. Check out our lineup and more at ntxradio.com. We thank our valued partners in helping us amplify the voices of North Texas. Be sure to connect with Todd Hurd and Associates, Attorneys at Law, for all your civil law needs at texasattorneylaw.com. And if you're processing credit cards, join the Swipe Nation today and save on processing fees at swipenationusa.com. Locally owned and operated. The holidays are just around the corner. Be sure to shop at thetiffy.com for Tiffy sleeves and scarves. And when you're ready to deliver the right message to the right people at the right time, email Tiffany at t.hurd@ntxradio.com for advertising rates. They are cheap, they are affordable, they are worth it. Do it. Call Tiffany for the best advertising rates you're ever going to find. And here we are with Robert Youens again, the man of the hour, talking about Texas-sized trips in a bathtub-sized boat. Robert, we were going to talk about the gear, some of the gear that you use on these trips, weren't we?
Yes, sir. So, first is a good boat. I thought I had a boat that was going to be up for the job and found out I needed a stronger boat. And the Inuits, as they were doing the repair, they did all the wells, and they said, we need to stretch a ice skid over that hull. So they actually cut the bottom out of another boat and cut the center rib out of it and stretched it over my hull.
They just happened to have an extra boat laying around
and welded it in place.
They just happened to have an extra boat laying around. They were like, yeah, we'll cut this one up.
Yeah, they do. They have junkyards. Their junkyards don't go away. So there's
nowhere to take them.
Years and years worth of junk over there. And there was an old 20-something foot Lund boat that they took the part out of. So over the course of this trip, I was contacted by Wellbuilt, by the manufacturer, and they said, well, we're so sorry you had trouble with the boat. If our dealer would only let us know we would have made sure you had a boat that wouldn't come apart, that could handle the ice. And so they ended up building me a boat. So when I got back, I now, I believe, have the toughest boat that's ever been built. It's they put some extra ribs in it. It's got welded ice skids over the top of the normal John boat keels. It's 1/4-inch thick angle aluminum welded over the keels. They also built a internal keelson, the full length of the inside of the boat between the ribs, and we added extra heavy duty gunnel. We put double knees on the transom. So we added, I call it added 85 pounds of tough. So if you want the toughest boat that's ever been built, just tell your well-built dealer you want a boat like Robert Youens's, and it's going to add about $1,500, but
sounds like it'll be worth it.
Toughest boat ever built.
Now, do you still have the other boat that you had?
I do, and I'm getting ready to sell it. I've been kind of cleaning it up, and I had to get a trailer for it, so it's going to be going for sale of the Arctic boat soon. But
I'd like to see some pictures of it if you don't mind.
Do what?
I'd like to see some pictures of that boat if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just let me know. Maybe we can get together and do an adventure together. But back to equipment.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Number one, you got to have a boat that'll stand up.
So I'm planning on taking one of those trips, and I'd be absolutely honored if you went with me. It's only going to be a 3 or 4 day trip, but it's going to be a blast, Robert.
Okay. Well, I just got back from the Atchafalaya because we were going to do this show from the Atchafalaya River.
We were going to. I was here, but the studio wasn't.
On adventures like that.
I was here, but the studio wasn't. So we didn't get to do that one. But yeah, we were supposed to do a show. It was going to have you on the banks of the Atchafalaya River. It was going to be mid-adventure, and you were going out there. There was a gentleman who was trying to set a paddling record, right? Like a world record for paddling, and you were going to meet up with him.
I don't know about a world record, but he was doing a source to sea, and I often, if there's a source to seer coming down the river and I've got the time, I'll run down there and meet him. This was a guy that had also done some kayaking up in the Arctic, and I particularly wanted to meet up with him and just kind of visit about his experience in the Arctic. And it was a lot of fun meeting up with him.
It sounds like it would be. One thing I definitely don't want to do is kayaking in the Arctic. I don't want to do that. Now, granted,
friends of mine,
I'd rather be cold than hot, but I don't want to be that cold for that long ever.
Yeah, a couple of friends of mine were the first to cross the Arctic 2 years ago. They covered the 2,000 miles east to west across the Canadian archipelago
in a kayak.
They were in. There's 4 of them. They were in 2-man kayaks, and it took them about 3 months. So they started as the ice was breaking, and by the finish, the ice was starting to form up.
That's a big no thank you from me.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. They ended up with some frostbite and stuff. But back to equipment.
Tell me a little bit about the tent.
Boat number one.
Tell me a little bit about the tent that you put up on a John boat, because I've been looking for one, and I can't find anything that's suitable.
Yeah, there isn't, and I looked again this week because I'm, as you know, the audience doesn't. I'm going to be heading to the Caribbean this coming summer and doing probably a 1,500-mile trip to the Bahamas
on a John boat.
And I was kind of looking at a tent for that trip, but I ended up building my own tent for the Arctic. And it worked out as basically a simple A-frame where I had poles in the middle, and I had it where you could hook to the sides of the boat, and it worked pretty well. I knew I could improve on it. So again, as you know, this last year I did a 2,500-mile trip from Washington State up to Central Alaska, up to Skagway, Alaska. And I built a more durable, lower profile tent for that trip because I knew I'd be hitting some pretty rough conditions up there.
Right.
And but I hand build them, get the wife's sewing machine out, and sew them out of ripstop nylon.
I might be contacting you to build me a tent soon for my boat. That sounds pretty interesting.
You couldn't pay me enough. I hate that stuff. I only do it if I have to. Go find an upholstery shop up there in your part of the woods and get someone to do it. But
only for your own personal comfort and safety, huh?
Yeah, I did it because I couldn't find anyone else to do it like I wanted it done. Okay, well, let's get back to equipment, man.
All right.
So next thing I needed was a motor. And the longest distance I was going to have to cover if I got to do my whole trip between towns was 750 miles.
Nonstop.
And I figured I needed at least 25% safety on fuel. So I figured I needed to have a boat that could cover 1,000 miles with all my gear and fuel on board. And I was told, impossible, Robert. Just can't carry that much fuel. And so that's when I started looking at boat design. And I actually was kind of semi-sponsored by PowerTech Props out of the Texarkana area. And they sent me like 14 different props to try. And we did, I got my gas mileage the best possible. I ended up going with a 40 horsepower Tohatsu. They're incredibly dependable. All the Mercury's 40 horsepower and down are Tohatsus. They make Mercury outboards. And then above 140, all Tohatsus are Honda. So Tohatsus are really, really good motors. And they had the lightest motor in the 40 horsepower range. And I knew they had really good dependability. So that's why I chose Tohatsu. I needed something that wasn't going to break. And I felt like Charles Lindbergh hopping in a plane and trying to fly across the Atlantic. It's just super critical. Okay, so I had my motor and I had my boat. Next thing I had to worry about fuel. So I ran 6 12-gallon tanks, and I had them set up like you would in an airplane, so I could turn one tank off and draw from another, and I could keep my trim and everything right as I used my fuel down. And then I had a large water separator fuel filter in the line between the tanks and my motor because getting water and fuel is an issue up there, and other contaminants I had heard before I went. So a really good fuel filter. And
what brand of a separator did you use?
What brand of what?
Separator, fuel separator.
Oh, I don't know. Bought something off Amazon. If someone sends me a message, I'll send them a link. But follow me on Facebook and send me a message if anyone's got questions. I answer everyone. And as I'm doing my journeys, I post live on Facebook as I can. And in the Bahama trip I got coming up, I should have a data plan for it'll cover almost the whole trip. So I'll post daily. And I fly drones also, so I'll be posting really cool drone footage. So we got boat, motor, fuel taken care of. And then the next thing I needed was to be able to find my way. So I needed a plotter, depth finder. You know what, most of the fishermen around Texas that have a Garmin, it's a fish finder and it's got a GPS on it.
Right.
I needed something really good, high end. I didn't want any rubber on it. I didn't want knobs. I wanted a glass face, and I ended up going with a Simrad and kind of a commercial chart plotter. And then I needed charts for the Arctic, and only Navionics, which most of your listeners are probably familiar with. Mm-hmm. It's an app you can load on your phone for navigating.
Shoot, I have Navionics.
App. And then there's C-Maps, and I ended up going with C-Maps on my plotter, and then I ended up having a tablet in my phone for backups with Navionics loaded on it. So knowing where you were was really, really important. So that was the third equipment. And the fourth equipment was communications. I had to maintain communications. I'm very fortunate to have a good friend of mine that's a licensed but retired captain. He's got a 100-ton rating, and he served as the guy that was giving, they call it a router. He was kind of looking at weather and suggesting routes and suggesting go, no go. So I had an inReach satellite communicator, and he would give me a write up every morning on, he'd give me recommendations, weather forecasts, and stuff like this. People told me, Robert, you're going to go up there and kill yourself. But I don't think they realized the preparation I put into this.
It sounds like you knew exactly what you were getting into. In terms of your satellite communication, you said you had a satellite communicator?
Yeah, it's a Garmin inReach. Everyone ought to own one. I took one, and it allowed me to send messages to my wife. I communicated with the Canadian Coast Guard with it. Every part of the deal, I didn't have to request, but I believe in making good connections. So I connected with the Arctic Marine Communications Center and the Coast Guard, and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about taking a small boat across the Arctic," and they sent me some paperwork, and it asked about the tonnage of my vessel and the size of the crew and all this, how many tons of fuel I was going to be carrying. And, I wrote back, vessel 1 ton, maybe fully loaded, 1-person crew. And they sent me back a letter that says, "Mr. Youens, we do not recommend you bring a boat that size of the Arctic and try to cross it." And
even they told you it was a bad idea.
Yeah, they thought I was crazy. But I sent them my qualifications, and I've got over 30,000 miles of blue water experience in commercial vessels as well as sailing. And so I'm not a newbie to this stuff. And they soon realized that, hey, I was a guy that had some background in this stuff. And
you kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah, might have a chance of knowing what I'm up to. And so they said, one thing, Mr. Youens, we would like to have a tracker so we can follow you. So I gave them the link to my satellite tracker so they could see where I was at any time. And we would like you to call in every morning, text us every morning and tell us how you're doing, what's the weather's like and stuff like that. So that was my deal. I got up every morning, told them, where I was planning to go, and what the weather conditions were, and or if I was going to be holding position, I'd tell them I was waiting for weather. I'll be holding this position, and so it was somewhat comforting knowing that the Canadian government was following me. At one of my camps, I had a Canadian helicopter come over and kind of circle around my camp.
Check on you.
So I knew there were eyes out there watching me, made me feel better. But when I talked to them, they said, Robert, if you called us for help, it would likely be 4 or more days for us to get to you.
Wow. That's not what you want to hear, but at least they're coming.
Yeah, well, the reality of the situation is my boat couldn't sink. I mean, with all those huge fuel cans and all the flotation it had. So if I totally breached the hull, I could get on top of the hull, out of the water, and probably survive for 4 days if it wasn't too rough. And so, yeah, it was somewhat comforting to know. But the trick was to not get in that situation, to not get caught in weather that would take me out.
Now, did you wear a dry suit for this trip?
I did not. You only want to wear a dry suit if you Absolutely have to, because basically you sweat in them all day long. And if you're in it for months and months and months, they get pretty disgusting. And I've spent time in them.
I can vouch for that.
I wore what would be considered commercial fishing gear or commercial sailing gear. So it was real dry, and I had 4 changes. Should I get an outfit totally wet, and I did get caught for probably 6 hours in 6-foot seas, 7-foot seas, on like 3-second intervals, so that vertical. So I was diving my boat through waves and stuff. But yeah, and I got wet, but I was prepared for it. And so we talked about communication. We hadn't talked about bilge pumps.
We haven't talked about coffee making either. I want to know how you make coffee up there.
I was prepared to make coffee. I had lots of coffee. But when you're diving through waves and you have a wave break over your boat, I had 2 1,100 gallon per hour bilge pumps. Well, I guess we did talk about that.
We did,
because of the leak. But if I took a wave, which I took some, it'd have that boat cleaned out in a hurry, and I could get back underway and get out of trouble. But so how to make coffee? Well, I mean, one of the big things up there, if you have butane and it's 30 degrees, it don't make gas.
Yeah, that's what I want to know about, because a lot of the standard camping gear that you would use down here is absolutely useless in the Arctic because of that.
I took special. You can get this stuff for camping at altitude and cold. It's propane boils at a lot lower temperature, so it'll still produce gas. And then they make some propane fuel cans that have some additives in it that'll take you down lower. And actually, I didn't get any temperatures lower than the 20s. So it wasn't that bad, no more than camping in the mountains or something.
Was there much dry firewood up there?
Where I started in Tuktoyaktuk, it was the mouth of the Mackenzie River. So there was a lot of firewood within 100 miles of that. But once I got 100, 150 miles east of the Mackenzie River, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing grows up there.
Right. There's no driftwood or anything.
Arctic tundra. Yeah. So what was coming down coming up the Mackenzie? It's kind of hard to think about, but all the rivers flow north there. So what was coming up the Mackenzie were forests 1,000 miles south of there, and that timber was washing out the mouth. So there was a lot of wood there, but there was no chance to make a fire once I was in the Central Arctic.
That is miserable, isn't it? Because I would imagine in the Central Arctic, all you want is some fire.
Yeah, well, so that comes to the point of, having a really good dry tent. And then to sleep, I slept in an aluminum boat. So you can imagine I'm in 37, 38 degree water, that the temperature coming up from the bottom was a potential problem. So I use fan fold, which a lot of your followers that are into camping might know about. But so I put a layer of fan fold foam on the bottom, and then I had a Thermarest air mattress that I'd put over the top of that. And then so that insulated me from the bottom of the boat, and I was kind of squeezed between the tanks. My boat width was determined by, was I going to be able to get tanks on both sides of me and sleep in the middle of them? So I was laying down between 70-something gallons of fuel. It was a little bit eerie. But and then for a sleeping bag, I use a Enlightened equipment. This is real high-tech stuff. It's a Enlightened equipment. It's a quilt that straps onto your air pad, and it's 950 down, which is the best down made. And then they put a treatment on it called hydrophobic, and they make the dam where it sheens water. It can't absorb water.
Right.
And then the blanket is also waterproof. So I carried a 20-degree Enlightened equipment down quilt, and I slept warm the whole time.
Enlightened equipment. I'm going to be looking them up when we get off here. That's very interesting.
Well, look at all that custom stuff is expensive. I think that little quilt I was sleeping in was a $400 quilt.
It's probably well worth it, though. Custom equipment. I mean, when you're doing this and doing it right, I mean, the right gear is the right gear, regardless of what the cost is. If you need it, you need it.
Well, when my wife says you're spending $400 on a quilt, I said, look, honey, how many nights a year I camp out? So if I camp out, 90, 100 nights a year, which I do, you divide that $400, it's only $4 a night.
It's
so that's a pretty cheap sleeping bag.
I'd say so.
I was a salesman by trade, and it's called Reduced to the Ridiculous. It works really good on wives.
It sounds like it probably does.
Yeah, you got to spread those costs out so make it not look so big when I drop money on sporting equipment.
Well,
but so I think we got through most of the stuff. We got a tent, we got sleeping gear, we got a stove to cook on, and I mainly took Mountain House meals, the dehydrated food.
So you're not having to catch your
there
own
was
dinner.
plenty of fresh water on the banks because you had all that ice from the winter. There's lakes all around that have like water running down. You can get fresh water.
And they always say not to eat snow, don't they?
Yeah, they're all in snow right now. The rivers are frozen. I talked to my buddy in Cambridge Bay. He said the bay, they got the snowmobiles out on the bay about 3 weeks ago. And so, yeah, it's cold up there, and they just entered the 24-hour day night, so they're in total darkness for about 3.5 months now.
See, that doesn't sound so scary to me. That sounds like heaven on earth for me. I love the darkness. I've always thrived on the nighttime.
Well, like Kevin was taking his 14-year-old son out to go hunting. The moon's starting to get pretty full, and they hunt by moonlight, and this is the time of year when they start hunting for warm furs.
Yeah.
They wait till it gets really cold and the wolves start getting the
winter coat
fuzziness in their coat, and the bears and stuff start getting really thick coats. So you want to kill them and tan them this time of year.
Well, Robert, we got about a minute left before we've got to wind this show down till next week. Okay. But I wanted to say I've greatly enjoyed having you on the show. These are, obviously these are topics that you and I have discussed privately, but to sit here and have it on the show, man, is like a dream come true. This is what my show is made of. At the end of the day, enough with the politics, enough with the war, enough with everything else going on outside the door. Get up, go outside, get off your phone, get off your tablet, go find some adventure. It's just on the other side of your front door. Get up, get out, go get it.
That is the truth. It never comes up. We're talking about all the fun stuff and adventure. So thank you for having me on, and I hope some of your followers will follow me on Facebook and check out Ageless Wonder. And
I guarantee you
look forward to visiting with you in the future, Ryan.
Thank you, Robert. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I can't wait to chat with you again.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in. Texas Wild with Ryan Prigmore, Adventures from the Water to the Campfire. We will see you next week.
This is the voice of Johnson County, JOCO Community Radio.